Welcome to this episode of Art with Mrs. Cap. In this episode, we're going to be looking at ancient China. So let's go ahead and take a look at the artwork from ancient China and some history that influenced the art. All right, so a brief history about ancient China. It is one of the oldest and longest lasting civilizations in the history of the world. The history can be traced back 4,000 years. It's located on the eastern part of Asia, and today China is considered to be the most populous country in the world, meaning it's the largest country by population. So dynasties, we're going to be talking about some dynasties. Dynasties are a powerful family that ruled most of China's history. The first dynasty was the Shang, and the last was the Qing. All right. The longest lasting empire in history began with the Qin dynasty under the first emperor Qin, who united all of China under one rule in 221 BC. Emperors would continue to rule China for more than 2,000 years. In the early periods of its history, the lands were ruled by a feudal system where lords owned the land and farmers tended the fields. In later years, the empire was run by civil service officials who ran the cities, collected taxes, and enforced the laws. Men had to pass exams to become officials. So we're continuing our brief history on China. All right, so there are two major rivers that influenced ancient China, the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. The Yangtze River is the third longest river in the world, and the Yellow River is the sixth longest river in the world. The great enemy of the Chinese were the Mongols, who lived to the north. China built a wall, which you can see behind me, that's thousands of miles long to try and keep the Mongols from invading. We call that wall the Great Wall of China. The Mongols did conquer China for a time. However, they established their own dynasty called the Yuan dynasty. All right, now the fun stuff. Art, culture, and religion of ancient China. So, as we've seen in previous lessons, art, culture, and religion are often tied together when we look at these civilizations. And this will continue as we look at other civilizations and then later on in countries and so forth. This is a common thing that ties and influences all of these things. So, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, they're known as the three ways. And these were the three main religions or philosophies of ancient China that impacted the way that people lived as well as the art they created. Art focused on the three perfections: painting, poetry, and calligraphy. The dragon to the Chinese was both ancient and modern, is a symbol of good luck, power, strength, and additionally, the dragon was the symbol of the emperor. Drinking tea has always been an important part of Chinese culture and remains so today. In fact, the ancient Chinese were the first people to drink tea, and initially it was primarily for medicine. So they would drink tea as a medicinal thing, not just, for enjoyment. But eventually it became kind of a cultural enjoyment thing to partake in. So legend states that silk was discovered in the emperor's garden in 2700 BC by Xi Lingxi, and this was the wife of Emperor Huangti. All right, so the art of the ancient Chinese. Ancient China covered a vast and ever-changing landscape. And the art produced over 3 millennia is just as varied. Still, despite continuous indigenous technical developments, changes in materials and taste, and the influences of foreign ideas, there are certain qualities that remained inherently Chinese and make it possible to describe in general terms and recognize it no matter when or where it was produced. These essential qualities include a love of nature, a belief in the moral and enlightening capacity of art, an admiration for simplicity, an appreciation of accomplished brushwork, an interest in viewing the subject from various perspectives, a loyalty to much used motifs and designs from lotus leaves to dragons. Chinese art would go on to influence neighboring civilizations in East Asia, and to the day, there is a global appreciation of its accomplishments, especially in ceramics, painting, and jade work. All right, so let's look at a timeline of ancient Chinese art. As you can see, it dates back thousands of years. So the earliest connection that we have to ancient Chinese art is around 4500 to 3000 BC. And we see one of the first depictions done in jade, and it was of a dragon. Okay, so this is like the time, if you think about this, this is the time of like the ancient Egyptians. So we studied ancient Egypt. We're kind of looking at that same time period here. All right, and then as you can see, we see the earliest known examples of woven silk in 2700 BC. Writing starts to develop under the Shang dynasty. Oracle bones, you see one of those above me in the middle. These were used for fortune telling and so forth, but we see some of the earliest examples of writing taking place on these. And then we see the Terracotta Army. There is an episode of Art with Mrs. Cat podcast that coordinates with this lesson where we dive in and go into detail on the terracotta soldiers or the Terracotta Army in that complex. And that was from 206 BC. So this was under the emperor that was Emperor Qin Shi Huang. And he is basically the founder of imperial China. He's like the one that united China. It remained under that same form of government that he established in 206 BC until the Communist Party of China took over in the 1900s. When that government was established, that replaced a government that had existed for thousands of years. So it's pretty amazing that this emperor established this in 206 and it like survived until the 20th century, and it wasn't until communism came in that it was replaced. So then in 105 CE, we see the invention of fine paper making process by Kowloon. And then we see calligraphy developing. We see court painters and woodblock printing process developing and so forth. So we see all of these things happening, and we see this evolution that takes place. And this is just in ancient China. This isn't even after ancient China. So we'll look at, more modern China and stuff, hopefully in a future lesson. But this is just a brief timeline with some highlights of ancient China and some of its accomplishments in the art world and so forth. All right, so calligraphy, the art of calligraphy for the ancient Chinese, it was certainly an art. It aimed to demonstrate superior control and skill using brush and ink. Calligraphy established itself as one of the major Chinese art forms during the Han Dynasty, and for 2 millennia after, all educated men were expected to be proficient in it. Some women, or at least certain figures at court, did become known as accomplished calligraphers as well. Most notably, Lady Wei, said to have taught the great master Wang Zhishu. More than mere writing, the art of using varying thicknesses of brushstroke, their subtle angles, their fluid connection to each other, all precisely arranged in imaginary space on the page to create an aesthetically pleasing whole. Calligraphy became one of the 6 classic and ancient arts alongside ritual, music, archery, charioteering, and numbers. The techniques and conventions of writing would influence painting, where critics looked for the artist's forceful use of brushstroke, their spontaneity, and their variation to produce the illusion of depth. Another influence on calligraphy skills on painting was importance given to composition and the use of blank space. Finally, calligraphy remained important, so important that it appeared on paintings and described and explained what the viewer was seeing and indicate the title. Eventually, such notes and even poems became an integral part of the overall composition and an inseparable part of the painting itself. All right, so painting. Chinese painters painted on various materials in many formats. The most popular formats were on walls, coffins and boxes, screens, silk scrolls, which were designed to look like a hand and hung on walls, fixed fans, book covers, and folding fans. The most popular materials with the earliest artists were wood and bamboo, but then the following were adopted: plastered walls, silk, and paper. Canvas would only be used widely from the 8th century. Brushes were made of animal hair, cut to a tapering end and tied to a bamboo or wood handle. The inks used were made from rubbing dried cake of animal or vegetable matter mixed with minerals and glue against whetstone. Each artist had to, make their own inks, as there was no commercial production of them. So as an artist, you didn't just go to like a craft store and buy your supplies. You actually had to make your supplies that you would use. And then the 2 most popular themes in painting were portraits and landscapes. So we see 2 examples of those most popular themes in painting in ancient Chinese world. In the ancient Chinese world. All right, sculpture. So large scale figure sculpture has not survived, but we do have some monumental examples. You can see above me, we have the terracotta army. This is one of those examples that remains. Like I said, there is an episode. We go into depth on this, but it's believed to be 7,000 soldier figures. There's like 600 horses and several chariots, and all these things are like life size. It is phenomenal, and it guards the tomb of the Qin emperor. One of the other examples are the Longmen caves, where the figures are actually 57 feet high. And there was a picture of that in one of the earlier pages that we looked at. So there's just a few of the monumental size sculptures that remain. All right, pottery. Chinese were masters of pottery and ceramics. So they produced everything from functional to, like things for storage, type earthenware, those kinds of things. They produced the first glaze wares, the first green celadons, and the first underglaze wares were painted with cobalt blue. So early developments in the technique and kilns led to both higher firing temperatures and the first glazed pottery during the Han period. So you kind of look, there's some more information on this page. We're not going to go into all of that, but you can see some examples of ancient Chinese pottery here on this page. It is, when we think about like Chinese pottery, the blue and white is what stands out. Typically, that came to prominence under the Ming Dynasty, which is a little bit later than the period that we're talking about, but it is still very much a part of that culture. So when we really think about these types of works, we really picture these like blue and white type pottery pieces, which are considered to be some of the most valuable in the world. All right, so Chinese pottery project. You are going to make this with items you can find around your house. You're actually going to use like a paper plate to make this. Now, if you want to take it up a step and you want to go to like the craft store, they do have like pottery pieces usually that you can paint. So if you wanted to do like actual pottery and you wanted to paint it, go ahead. That's perfectly okay. But the expectation for this project is to use a paper plate, and then you're going to do a design on it to mimic Chinese pottery, that blue and white pottery that we were looking at. You can look at other examples too, but to make it easy and simple, really all you need for this is a blue medium, whether that's paint or ink. It's your choice. And then you're going to try to look up motifs and designs that are traditional to this period. Think of like dragons and fish and flowers. These are all really good choices. And so you're going to draw inspiration from those. You're going to make your own design on a paper plate, or if you want to get pottery that you can paint, that's fine too. So you're gonna do that blue and white kind of a combination, and then that's going to be your project. There will be a detailed demo on this that you can view in the assignment for this week. But this concludes our lesson on ancient Chinese art. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to reach out. I will see you next time on Art with Mrs. Cap.